Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for tonight's debate, contending the motion, "This House believes Britain is more divided than ever." Before we get started, I'd just like to remind everyone of the way this debate works and some of the rules of the House. So we're going to begin by hearing from our first speaker for the proposition, followed by our first speaker for the opposition, and then we'll head to a round of floor speeches where anyone in the audience is able to stand up and make a short 2-minute-ish speech, either in proposition, opposition, or abstention of the motion. We'll then return to our paper speakers, have another round of floor speeches, and finally back to our paper speakers before going to a vote. During our paper speakers' speeches, you're allowed to make what are known as POIs, point of informations, which is when you can make a short minute or so contribution to somebody's speech, maybe asking a question or taking them up on something they might have said. Please keep these respectful and relevant to the motion at hand. And also, every speaker has the right to reject or accept these. Every speaker will have 10 minutes to state their case, the first minute and the last minute of which is protected time, so please, no POIs then. I would also like to remind you of the prize for floor speeches. So this week, our prize for the best floor speech is your own personalised Jats flavour. So please do, when you stand up, give your name and your college, and we'll come find you if you've won the prize. So, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our first paper speaker this evening, Mish Rahman. Mish Rahman is a British Bangladeshi Muslim born and bred in the West Midlands. He was a national executive member of the Labour Party from 2020 to 2024 and vice chair of the campaign group Momentum. He is a trustee for anti-racism education charity Show Racism the Red Card and an anti-racism activist. Mish, you have the ears of the House.
Thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, while I was researching the Union's history and its list of speakers, I found some of the most decorated figures in history have spoken here. Ronald Reagan, Winston Churchill, Theodore Roosevelt, Bill Gates, the Dalai Lama. But born in Walsall, West Midlands, my home, and as the British-born son of Bangladeshi parents, I dug deeper and found some Bangladeshi academics have spoken here too. You've had Sarah Hussain, and you've had the Bangladeshi High Commissioner as well, Saida Muna Tasneem. But I couldn't find any other paper speaker in proposition of a motion in a debate born of Bangladeshi parents from the Sylhet region, or a son of an Indian restaurant waiter and housewife, or any speaker himself who amongst recent occupations can claim to be a restaurant waiter, delivery driver, or private hire taxi driver. Speak at your historic decorated Union. I may be wrong, but I do know is that nobody from my family has ever been to Cambridge University, and I certainly have never been to Cambridge City. This is my first time. So to be here, it truly is a privilege for me, my family, and my class. To be here, these institutions, which were not built for people like me, but my class, the working class, is not just white. The working class is also brown, it's black, it's Christian, it's Muslim, it's Jewish, it's Hindu, it's Sikh. It's for people of all faiths and none. The working class doesn't have a specific sexuality. It's LGBTQ+, as well as it's straight. It's all genders, male, female, non-binary. The working class is people who work and those unable to work. And the working class is the best of what a united Britain is and should be. Britain should be a welcome and sufficient place for all. But our diversity, this diversity, is the one that's being weaponized against us. I'll come to this later. But today I stand before you to assert that Britain is far from united, but indeed more divided than ever before. This isn't just political theatre, it's a reality embedded in the lives of millions of people across the country. As we witness today, far-right riots in our streets, successive governments mishandling the economy, starving children, especially those parents whose parents are on benefits. We have freezing pensioners given the choice between heating and eating. Governments are punishing students with obscene levels of debts and tuition fees for having the audacity to learn. while the richest in society and corporations remain untouched. And then we also have British foreign policy, which includes carte blanche support for an apartheid regime, which in response to the horrific October the 7th attack delivers collective punishment using starvation as a weapon, resulting in a plausible case for genocide, bombing innocent civilians, mainly women and children, as well as hospitals, churches, mosques, schools, universities, and killing journalists. Our British foreign policy rightly knows how to condemn Russian war crimes, but ignores and supports Israeli war crimes. The truth stares us in our face. Our nation is fractured. Our moral compass is broken. And I believe that this division has its roots in years of mismanagement, of neglect, as well as callous governments that serve the wealthiest at the expense of everyone else. Our political system seems incapable of bringing us back together. But why? First, let's talk about economic inequality, a wound that has festered since the birth of Thatcherism. Britain for years has been championed as a land of opportunity, a place where hard work can change one's fate. But look around, is that Britain still a reality? No, because under the last Conservative government, the gap between the rich and poor has grown wider than ever. They've pushed austerity policies that ripped resources from our communities that needed them the most. You see food banks, you see homelessness, you see record high child poverty. These aren't just abstract figures. They are daily realities for millions of Britons who have been left out and left behind. We've seen the wealthiest 1% accumulate record profits while working class communities can barely afford their heating bills or a weekly grocery shop. And this economic divide has created a society where the privileged and the poor live in separate worlds, unable even to understand each other, let alone come together. The economic divide is just a spark, but it's not the only fire, because Britain is a successful multicultural society. Today's equalities debates and the speakers are an example of this, but we are a nation culturally divided because our own diversity is weaponized against us. This didn't happen in a vacuum. The Conservatives, time and time again, turned immigrants into scapegoats. They painted people fleeing war and poverty as threats to our British way of life. And Brexit was the moment that they unleashed Pandora's box, feeding nationalism and xenophobia under the guise of taking back control. In reality, what did we take back? Who did we take back control for? For the hedge fund managers betting against our economy? For multinational companies that continue to exploit cheap labor while pushing workers out of jobs? Brexit didn't unite us as a nation, but referendum itself fragmented us into people who saw others as threats rather than their own neighbors. So let's address the recent wave of far-right riots. People are angry, but let's ask ourselves, why are they angry? They feel unheard, forgotten, and economically abandoned. So they turn to the loudest voice that claims to listen to them. These voices exploit their anger. They turn it into hatred for immigrants, for refugees, for anyone deemed an outsider. And this is a strategy as old as time, dividing the working class, turning them against one another, and distract them from the systems of oppressions that keep us down. And who's to blame for this? Years of right-wing rhetoric about us versus them, creating an environment where far-right sentiment can grow. Our nation is more polarized than ever before because we've been conditioned to see difference as a threat rather than diversity as a strength. Blairism isn't without fault here either. It's opened up the hostile environment, and now we find ourselves under this current Labour Party, who we hope might change the tide. But has this new government brought us hope or any signs of any meaningful change? Has it brought a vision of unity? I don't think so. We have a spineless Labour leadership that is afraid to challenge the systems that got us here in the first place. They want to court business elites while paying lip service to working class people. They tell us they're different from the Tories, but when it comes to standing up for working class interests, for radical economic transformation, for redistribution of wealth and power, or for foreign policy that reflects our values, they are silent. They're playing politics as usual while the nation burns with division. They don't offer solutions to the economic and social wounds inflicted by years of Tory rule. Instead, they try to appease some sides which in practice means appeasing none. And as the far right gets stronger and more popular, we are here left with populist far-right parties such as Reform, who gain ground with their snake oil-selling politicians, and people are starting to wonder if change can come from the fringes. In this debate, we have on the opposition my friend, the Member of Parliament for Leicester South, who himself is a product of this division. People are desperate for voices that truly speak to their struggles and aren't afraid to challenge the status quo. That's why they want answers from people like my friend from Leicester South, who has come from an independent position. They want answers why their wages haven't risen in a decade, why their rents are through the roof, why they're forced to compete for services that should be a right and not a privilege. People are paying more tax than ever before, but for less public services. So this vacuum left by the mainstream parties has created fertile ground for those that are willing to be divisive, for those who know that stoking fear and anger can rally people behind them. And this government is now laying the ground for our own version of Trump and fascism with Farage and Reform. So now let me ask you this. What does it mean to be a united Britain? Is it simply living on the same island, following the same laws, under the same flag, or applauding politicians who stand in front of an increasing amount of Union Jacks competitively while delivering speeches? Or is it about building a society where everybody feels seen, everybody feels heard, everybody feels valued? Today, we are a divided Britain, and that division has been systematically deepened by a political class that cares more about power than about people. A conservative government that lined the pockets of the wealthy and abandoned the rest of us. A Labour Party that claims to stand for us, but dares not stand on issues that matter. All these levers of power, themselves emboldened by a media class dominated by client journalism and not by those whose job it is to hold the powerful to account. If we are ever to be united again, we need a radical reimagining of who we are as a nation and who we want to become. We need policies enacted now that close the gaps between rich and poor. Policies that treat diversity as a strength, not as a problem to be solved. And a political class that actually serve the people and for our public services instead of their own self-interest. The Britain I envision, and I hope many of you too do, is one that isn't the Great Britain or United Kingdom in name only, but in practice, in spirit. We must demand better of our political class, and we must hold accountable those who profit from our divisions. Only then can we hope to bridge the gaps and create a society that stands together. We need to start facing these truths now. We need to hold these people in power accountable, challenge the media narratives, build the generational and cultural gaps, and work towards a society where equality and unity aren't just ideals, but realities. Because if we don't, we're not just looking at a divided Britain, we're looking at a broken one. I hope the House votes for this motion tonight. Thank you.